welcome to SULKNATIONtv. In this episode, no, I'm not just driving over really horrific speed humps. I am in fact going to be discussing the 5 things I love most about my Volkswagen Golf 1.6 litre TDI. Now, I know that you're going to be thinking, that sounds like it's going to be really boring because it's a quite boring car. And, you know, potentially you're right. Potentially it is going to be quite boring. But keep in mind this car is remapped and there are things that do really benefit not only your driving experience of this car, but also the car itself. It's got some things going for it. It really does. I'm stuck at some traffic lights. It will get more interesting shortly. So the 5 things aren't necessarily in order. It's not the 5th best thing or the 1st best thing, first or last. It's just 5 things that I really like about this car. So the first thing is comfort. Now, I find this car very comfortable to drive. Not just in the way that it drives, but being sat in the seat of this car for hours on end doesn't cause me much pain at all. It's definitely one of the most comfortable cars I've driven, and I think that comes down primarily to the seats. Now the seats are sporty-ish. They're not sport seats, but they are sporty-ish, and they support the torso either side really nicely. The seats in this car aren't electric, they are manually adjusted, but they're easy to adjust. The lumbar support works perfectly, and they really do help you set out a driving position that is comfortable not only for your back, but also for your legs, you know, with the pedals, and your shoulders, because, you know, if your steering wheel isn't set up right, or your seat in relation to the steering wheel isn't set up right, you can get really bad pains in your shoulders. I've had that where I haven't had my driving position set up correctly, or have struggled to get it to be set up in a comfortable enough way, and it really does take a toll on your driving experience. It tires you out even more if you're driving a long distance and you're not comfortable. So that's definitely one of the 5 things I love most about this car is the driving position. I think that the driving position is bang on. It's comfortable. It's got more than enough space in the boot. If you're a relatively small person, the back seat is adequate. But for me, and this is my 5 things that I love most about it, not the 5 best things about a Volkswagen Golf TDI. It's what I think are my favourite things, my best things. That's definitely up there. Next we have a big one, which is fuel economy. Now, I'm not going to make a comparison between this and my R53 Mini Cooper S, because that just would be unfair on the Mini. But it's a 1.6 litre TDI. You're going to expect good fuel economy. It's remapped, which, you know, yeah, it adds a little bit of thrust, but, you know, it does also benefit fuel economy. And I average 52.7 miles per gallon, which is not to be snorted at. It's not to be ignored, because that is very good fuel consumption. The economy of this car is great. You can fill it up and do quite a lot of miles comfortably. I think the range when you fill it up is about 565 miles, which, alright, I'm not getting 565 miles, of course I'm not, but I'm not getting that far off it either. So yeah, its fuel economy is definitely up there as a reason to love this car. For me, it's so cheap to run, it's cheap to insure because of the size of the engine, that, you know, I'm winning every time I fill up the tank. Whereas in other cars that I said I wouldn't compare it to, I'm skint by the end of a journey. So fuel economy, big factor in why I love this car. With it being a Volkswagen Golf, it's a Mk7, it's handling for a car that is essentially out of factory a low power diesel. The handling of this car is so good. You know, it's as you'd expect with a Golf, it's easy to drive, but when you chuck it into bends at speed, even with the stock suspension and the piddly 16-inch wheels, this car really does handle superbly. Its chassis is great, and you know, yeah, you've got settings on the car that apparently if you put it in sport, it adjusts the dampers in the suspension. It does it? I don't know. It feels a little bit tighter and you get a little bit more throttle response, but the general handling, and it doesn't matter realistically what setting it's on, is very, very good. I've driven cars of a similar size in the same sort of class as this, let's say like a Mark II Ford Focus, and that doesn't compete when it comes to handling. This car, against a similar spec car of its size and class, this car outhandles it. It really does. It's one of the factors as to why this car is such a fun car to drive, with it being remapped, is because the handling is so good. So now I've got a bit more pace. I say now, I mean I remapped the car when I first got it, but you know, you remap it, you get a bit more pace, but you also get already very dialed in handling. You know, we've got a bell end coming up here. Yeah, the road runs out your knob. Look at that, what an asshole. And yeah, part of me thinks maybe I should have done that because the Fiat 500 in front of me is going quite slowly, but I'm not going to do that. Now this next point could be contentious because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I think the Mk7 Volkswagen Golf, whether it be this one, the GTI and R, but let's stick to this one because it's about my Golf, I think the looks are really, really good. I think it's a very good looking car. I think it's, at the rear, I think it's where it really beats its competitors. I mean, if you line this up, and I have, against an A-Class Mercedes, the front of the A-Class Mercedes is more aggressive than the front of this Golf. But the rear of that A-Class Mercedes is just boring in comparison. I think the rear of this car makes it stand out. It looks aggressive. It looks as you'd want it to look. It really does. It's got very good status on the road. When you really sit there and think or look when you're driving, and you come up against a similar aged Vauxhall Astra or a Mercedes A-Class or even a BMW 1 Series of a similar age, the rear of this car is far more aggressive looking and far more handsome than those competitors. I think it's got a bit more of a sleek, streamlined look as well. I don't think that a lot of its competitors look as good as this car looks from front to back. Last and not least, and definitely something that you don't want to be forgetting, is reliability. Now, this car is by far the most reliable car that I've owned. This car has done 145,500 miles at time of recording. It's a 2013 plate car. It's done a lot of miles. The clutch didn't need to be replaced until it got to about 140,000 miles. That's ridiculously good value for money. And you know, when I got it replaced, it hadn't gone completely, but you could tell it was on its way. So I probably could have eked out another couple of thousand miles on it without it being terrible, but I'm not stupid, I'm not going to do that. The only other things realistically that have, let's say, been faulty, I've had to have a brake caliper replaced when I got my brake discs and pads done, and I've had to replace myself the fan motor thing. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. I'll find the receipt and I'll ping up the name of the exact component now. But yeah, I replaced that myself. The fan blower motor, something like that, which sits in the passenger seat footwell. And yeah, I replaced that myself. The part cost about 130 quid. It took me about half an hour. It's a few bolts, and I didn't have fans when the old one broke down, which sucked. So, well, it didn't suck or blow. But yeah, that wasn't ideal. I didn't have fans and it was the summer. So, not fun. But once it was replaced, it worked perfectly again. There was no other issues, and that's it. They're the only things that, touch wood, have been an issue in my ownership of this car. I've owned this car for 3.5, nearly 4 years now, and I've done most of the miles that are on this car. I've done myself, and yeah, I think finding a car that has those 5 factors to love about it makes it a good car. Is it as enjoyable to drive as some other cars? Of course it isn't. Would I prefer a GTI? Yes. Would I prefer a Golf R? 100%. Is this cheaper to run? Yeah, without doubt. So, that's the 5 things I love about my Volkswagen Golf 1.6 litre TDI. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to my channel. Anybody watching first time, there are videos that are probably better than this one to go and check out. But, you know, subscribe anyway, because something might come up in the future that you want to watch. And until the next time, I've been me, you've been you, and well done for that.